She tore the divorce papers in half. Right there, in front of the entire board of directors. Victoria Bennett, billionaire CEO, the most powerful woman in any room she walked into, looked at the man standing beside her. The man everyone said was beneath her, the man they all laughed at. And she said 4 words that silenced the entire room. I choose him. Period. Nobody saw that coming. Not the board. Not the media, not even Ethan. Because 6 months ago? This marriage was a lie. A contract, a performance. A business decision dressed up in wedding flowers. So, how did it become the realest thing either of them had ever known? Drop a comment with your city. Let me see how far this story has traveled. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You don't want to miss where this goes. The envelope landed on Ethan Parker's workbench at 2:14 on a Tuesday afternoon. And it didn't belong there. Nothing about it belonged there. Actually, it was cream-colored, heavy stock, the kind of paper that costs more per sheet than Ethan made in an hour. His name was written across the front in clean, precise handwriting, not printed. Not typed, handwritten, which meant someone had taken time with it. Someone had thought about him specifically. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. His hands still black with grease from the transmission he'd been rebuilding since 7 that morning. He wiped his palms on his shop rag slowly, the way a man does when he's buying himself a few extra seconds to think. He picked it up. He turned it over. The return address on the back said, Bennett Global Logistics, Executive Suite, 14th floor. His stomach did something complicated. That was his boss's address. That was Victoria Bennett's address. Ethan Parker was not the kind of man people sent fancy envelopes to. He was 35 years old, medium height, with the kind of broad shoulders that came from actual work and not from a gym membership. He had dark hair that needed a cut, a jaw that hadn't seen a razor since Sunday, and eyes that his daughter Lily called the color of the sky right before it rains, which was her way of saying gray. But Lily was 8 years old, and she preferred poetry to accuracy. He drove a 2009 Ford F-150 with a cracked dashboard and 187,000 miles on it. He lived in a 2-bedroom house in Dayton, Ohio, with Lily and a 3-legged dog named Chester. He made $62,000 a year before taxes, and he was proud of that number because he had earned every single cent of it. He had worked at Bennett Global Logistics for 4 years, starting as a temp and earning his position as senior fleet mechanic through the kind of reliability that companies talk about in annual reviews but rarely actually reward. He kept 17 company trucks running. He came in early. He stayed late. He never called in sick unless Lily was sick. And when Lily was sick, he called in personally, explained the situation, and made up the hours on the weekend. He was not a man who attracted attention. He was not a man who attracted anything, really, except maybe the quiet respect of people who noticed that the work always got done. His marriage had ended 3 years ago when his wife Sandra looked at the life they'd built together, the small house, the tight budget, the future that looked exactly like the present, and decided she wanted something different. She hadn't been cruel about it. She'd actually been very calm, which somehow made it worse. She'd sat across from him at their kitchen table and said, Ethan, I love you. I just don't love this life. She moved to Seattle. She sent Lily birthday cards and occasional FaceTime calls. She was not a bad person. She was just gone, and Ethan had done what Ethan always did. He stayed. He worked. He raised his daughter. He did not feel sorry for himself. At least not out loud. He opened the envelope in the break room, after the rest of the afternoon crew had gone back to the floor. He pulled out a single card, the same heavy cream paper, and read it twice before he understood what he was looking at. It was a wedding invitation. Victoria Ann Bennett, and he stopped. The second name line was blank. There was a handwritten note clipped to the bottom of the card, and it said 9 a.m. VB. That was it. No explanation, no context, just my office, Thursday. And a wedding invitation with a missing groom. Ethan set the card down on the break room table and looked at it for a while. Then he picked up his phone and called his buddy Marcus, who worked in shipping on the second floor and knew everything that happened in this building before it officially happened. "Hey," Ethan said when Marcus picked up. "Did you know the boss is getting married?" There was a pause on the other end. "What? Someone sent me an invitation." "To whose wedding?" "Victoria Bennett's." The pause this time was longer. "Ethan," Marcus said carefully, "are you feeling okay?" Thursday morning. Ethan wore his best shirt, which was a dark blue button-down that Lily had picked out for him 2 Christmases ago. He got to the building at 8:45, told the front desk who he was, and rode the elevator to the 14th floor, which he had been on exactly twice in his 4 years at the companies, once for a safety briefing, and once when a pipe burst in the executive bathroom and they needed someone who knew how to shut off a water main. The 14th floor was quiet. Everything up here was soft, the carpet, the lighting, the voices. People moved differently up here, like they were all in slow motion and aware of being watched. Victoria Bennett's assistant, a composed young woman named Dana, looked up when he stepped off the elevator. "Mr. Parker?" "Yes, ma'am. She's expecting you." "Go right in." He knocked anyway. "Come in, Ethan." Victoria Bennett's office was large enough to contain Ethan's entire house. But she wasn't sitting at her desk. She was standing at the window, looking out over the city, her hands clasped behind her back. She was wearing a charcoal blazer and dark slacks, her dark hair pulled back from her face, and she had the posture of a woman who had spent years making sure nobody ever saw her uncertain. Victoria Bennett was 41 years old. She had built Bennett Global Logistics from a regional freight operation with 12 trucks and 22 employees into a national corporation with $400 million in annual revenue and offices in 6 states. She had done this in 12 years, largely through intelligence, stubbornness, and an ability to see 3 moves ahead of everyone in the room. She was also a plus-size woman in an industry dominated by men who believed that how a person looked was directly related to how seriously they should be taken. She had spent her entire career fighting that assumption. She had won most of those fights, but winning, Ethan would eventually learn, had cost her something. "Close the door," she said. Without turning around, he closed it. "Sit down," he sat. She turned around. Her expression was composed, careful, the way a person looks when they've rehearsed what they're about to say, and they want to make sure they deliver it correctly. "You got my invitation," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Did you understand it?" "I understood it was a wedding invitation," Ethan said. "I didn't understand why there was a blank where the groom's name should be." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked to her desk, pulled open a drawer, and set a thick folder on the surface between them. "I'm going to explain something to you," she said, "and I need you to hear the whole thing before you respond. Can you do that?" "Depends on what it is." Something shifted in her expression, not offense. "Exactly. More like surprise. Like she wasn't used to people pushing back on her framing before she'd even started." "Fair enough," she said. She told him about the board. Bennett Global had 11 board members, and 5 of them led by a man named Richard Hale, who had been trying to acquire the company for 2 years, had been building a case for Victoria's removal. Hale's argument was not about financials. The company's financials were excellent. His argument was about image, about stability, about what he called, in various carefully worded memos, the need for mature leadership with demonstrated personal responsibility. What he meant, stripped of the corporate language, was this: Victoria Bennett was unmarried, had no children, and in Hale's estimation, a woman in her 40s without a family was an instability risk. He had actually used the phrase emotional liability in one internal communication, and Victoria had the document to prove it. "They're going to call a vote," Victoria said. "In 6 weeks. They have the numbers to remove me as CEO of my own company." "Can they do that?" Ethan asked. "With the current shareholder structure and the board composition?" "Yes. Technically and legally, yes. And what does a wedding do about that? It changes the narrative. She said it cleanly. Without embarrassment. It demonstrates stability. A husband, a family, it shifts the image from unstable single woman to grounded executive with personal foundations. It's cynical, it's ridiculous, and it will work. Ethan looked at the folder on the desk. He had not touched it. Why me, he said. Victoria didn't answer immediately. She sat down across from him, which was unusual. She was the kind of person who preferred to remain standing in difficult conversations, and she folded her hands on the desk. Because I trust you, she said. You barely know me. I know you better than you think. She paused. 4 years, Ethan. You've worked here 4 years. Do you know how many times your name has come up in management conversations in 4 years? I don't know. Few? 14 times, she said. I had my assistant pull the records. 14 separate instances where your name appeared in supervisor reports, safety reviews, or department communications. Every single time. It was positive. Not one complaint. Not one incident. Not one instance of you cutting a corner or making an excuse or making someone else's life harder. She opened the folder and turned it toward him. It was, he realized with a kind of stunned discomfort, a file on him, on his work history, on his performance reviews, on things that had been observed and recorded about him for 4 years without his knowledge. You treat the cleaning crew the same way you treat department heads, Victoria said. You covered 3 shifts for Marcus when his mother was sick without being asked. You found the billing error in the Eastern Fleet maintenance account last spring and reported it directly instead of ignoring it. And it saved the company $40,000. Ethan said nothing. You're a good man, Victoria said. And good men are rarer than money. It was a straightforward thing to say. Delivered without sentimentality, and somehow that made it land harder than if she'd tried to flatter him. I need someone I can trust to do this, she said. Not someone who wants something from me. Not someone who will see this as an opportunity to leverage. Someone who will keep their word because they gave it. And you think that's me. I know that's you. She walked him through the terms. 2 years. That was the duration she was proposing. Long enough to stabilize the board's situation, to re-establish her position, to give the company time to adjust the shareholder structure so that Hale and his allies couldn't do this again. During those 2 years, they would maintain a public marriage, joint appearances, a shared residence. He would move into her home. Or she could arrange something close by, whatever worked best for Lily. They would be photographed together. They would attend company events together. They would present themselves as a couple. Privately, they would remain 2 separate people with a business agreement. In exchange, Ethan would receive a salary supplement that would triple his current income, a college fund established in Lily's name that would cover 4 years at any institution she chose, and full medical and dental coverage for both himself and his daughter under Victoria's personal insurance policy. At the end of 2 years, Victoria said, we separate amicably. The narrative is simply that the pressures of our different worlds made a long-term partnership difficult. No blame, no drama. You walk away with the financial security. I walk away with my company. She pushed the folder toward him. The contract is in there. I've had my legal team draft it. But you're welcome to have your own attorney review it before you sign anything. Ethan did not pick up the folder. He sat back in his chair, and he looked at Victoria Bennett across the enormous desk. And he thought about Sandra leaving, and he thought about Lily's face. When Lily had figured out that her mother wasn't coming back, not that month, not the month after, not for Christmas, he thought about what it did to a kid. To be part of something that turned out to be temporary. To be part of something that had conditions attached to it. I have a daughter, he said. I know, she's 8. She's at an age where she notices things, where she asks questions, where she remembers. He paused. If I bring her into this, if we do this, and she gets attached to something that isn't real, and then 2 years from now it ends. I understand the concern. With respect, Ethan said. I don't think you do. Not completely. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then explain it to me, she said. He hadn't expected that. He'd expected pushback, or reassurance, or a polished corporate answer designed to address his concern without actually engaging with it. He had not expected her to simply ask. My wife left 3 years ago, he said. And Lily, she's tough. She's a tough kid. She handled it better than I did. Honestly. But there are things she does now. She checks. She double checks. If I say I'm going to pick her up at 3, she texts me at 2:45 just to confirm. She got nervous when I was late to her school play by 10 minutes. She needs to know things are real, that they're going to stay. He stopped. I won't do something to her that makes that worse, he said. I won't let her build something in her heart that I know isn't real. I can't do that to her. Victoria looked at him for a long time. What if it could be real? She said. Not romantically. I'm not talking about that. But what if I gave you my word that I would be genuinely present for her? Not as a performance, not for the cameras, but actually, really, as someone in her life? That's a hard word to keep for 2 years and then walk away from. I know. People say things they mean and then can't follow through on. That too. Another silence. Then let me ask you something, Victoria said. You said you won't do something that makes things worse for Lily. But right now, what does Lily's future look like? Not the love and the stability you give her. I'm not questioning that. I mean the financial reality. What does the next 10 years look like? Practically, Ethan said nothing, because she knew the answer, and so did he. She's smart, Victoria said. I can tell that from your file. From the teacher. Notes you've mentioned in passing to your supervisor. She's creative and she's curious. She deserves every possible open door. She paused. I'm not trying to buy your cooperation, but I am telling you that the opportunity in that folder is real. What I'm offering her is real. And the rest of it? 2 years, Victoria said. After that, whatever happens, the fund stays in her name. The coverage stays in place. Whatever happens between us, she doesn't lose what she was promised. Ethan stared at the folder. I'll think about it, he said. He thought about it for 4 days. He thought about it while he rebuilt the brake system on truck 17, and while he made Lily's lunches, and while he lay awake at 2 in the morning listening to Chester wheeze on the foot of the bed. He thought about the numbers in the folder, which were not modest. They were genuinely life-changing. The kind of numbers that meant Lily's future opened up in ways it currently couldn't. He thought about the risk. He thought about what his mother would say. He thought about what Sandra would say, and then he thought about how Sandra had forfeited the right to have a vote on his decisions. He thought about Victoria's face when he'd told her about Lily's checking behavior. The way she'd been quiet in a way that felt like listening and not like waiting for him to finish. On the 5th day, he called Marcus. Hypothetically, Ethan said, if someone offered you something that could change your kids' lives, but you weren't sure it was the right thing to do, how much money are we talking? Marcus said. A lot. Then you already know what you're going to do, Marcus said. You're just scared. That's not Ethan. You've been scared since Sandra left. Of getting it wrong. Of doing something that messes Lily up. But you know what messes kids up? Marcus paused. Watching their parent refuse to try things because they're afraid. That messes them up too. Ethan didn't say anything. Whatever this is, Marcus said, if you think it could actually help her, that's your answer. Man, that's the only answer you ever have. He called Victoria's office the next morning. Dana answered, and he asked if he could have 15 minutes with Ms. Bennett at her earliest convenience, and Dana said she'd check the calendar. And then Victoria herself picked up the line and said, You've decided. It wasn't a question. I have conditions, Ethan said. Tell me. Lily comes first, in everything. If something in this arrangement is hurting her, it stops, regardless of timing or optics or what it costs either of us. She comes first, agreed. We tell her the truth. Not the full legal truth, she's 8. She doesn't need a contract. But she doesn't believe something false about what we are. We find words she can understand that are honest. Agreed. And if at any point you make a promise to her, Ethan said, you keep it. I don't care what's happening with the board or the company or anything else. If you tell her you'll be at her school play, you're at her school play. A pause on the line. Those are serious conditions, Victoria said. They're the only ones I have. Another pause. Agreed, she said. All three. Ethan exhaled slowly. All right, he said. All right. I'll do it. There was a silence on the line. And he could not quite read what was in it relief. Maybe, or something more complicated than that. Thank you. Ethan, Victoria said. Her voice was quiet, quieter than he'd ever heard it. In 4 years of working for this woman, he almost said, you're welcome. The way you say it automatically, the way manners run on autopilot. Instead, he said, don't thank me yet. Let's see how this goes. And somewhere on the 14th floor of a building in Dayton, Ohio, Victoria Bennett did something that Dana, who had worked for her for 6 years, had never once seen her do in the middle of a business call. She smiled. The wedding was set for 6 weeks out. 6 weeks to plan a ceremony that the entire business world would be watching. 6 weeks to build a story convincing enough to fool a board of directors. A media cycle. And this was the part that kept Ethan awake at 3 in the morning, his 8-year-old daughter. The morning after he said yes, Ethan sat across from Lily at their kitchen table while she ate cereal and drew a horse in her notebook at the same time. Because Lily always did 2 things simultaneously. And he tried to figure out what words a man uses to explain something like this to someone like her. He had been sitting there for 11 minutes, which he knew because he'd been watching the clock above the stove. And he still had nothing. Dad, Lily said without looking up from the horse. Yeah, Bug, you're doing the thing where you stare at your coffee, but you're not drinking it. I'm thinking. About what? He looked at her. She was wearing the yellow pajama top with the small star pattern that she'd had since she was 6, and refused to give up, despite the fact that it now stopped 3 inches above her wrists. Her hair was in a braid she'd done herself, slightly uneven on the left side. She looked exactly like what she was, a child who was completely fine. Doing perfectly well, going to be okay. He wanted so badly to keep her that way. I need to tell you something, he said. And I need you to ask me every question you have. Okay, don't hold them. She put down her pencil. She looked at him with the kind of attention that 8-year-olds have when they sense the ground shifting, not panic. Just alertness. Just readiness. Okay, she said. You know Ms. Bennett. My boss. The one whose company logo is on your work shirts. That's her. She and I are going to get married. Lily stared at him. She said nothing for 5 full seconds, which was a long time for Lily, who usually responded to everything within 2. For real, she said. For real. Do you love her? And there it was. The question he had known was coming and had no clean answer for. He had rehearsed this. He had thought about it for 4 days. He had tried out different versions of the truth in his head, turning them around, looking for the one that was honest, without being something an 8-year-old had to carry. I care about her, he said, and I respect her. And sometimes, when people who respect each other decide to build something together, love is something that can grow from that. It doesn't always start the way it does in movies. Lily thought about this seriously. The way she thought about everything. Is she nice? She said. I think she's trying to be. That's different from being nice. Yeah, Ethan said. It is. But I think trying counts for something. Lily picked up her pencil again. She looked at her horse for a moment. Then she said, still looking at the notebook, is she going to live here? We're going to figure out the living situation together. Is she going to try to be my mom? No one is ever going to try to be your mom. Bug, you have a mom. Ms. Bennett is going to be someone new. Something different. We'll figure out what that word is together. Okay, another pause. Okay, Lily said, that's it? Okay. She looked up at him then, and she had the expression she got, sometimes that made her look 40 years old, this tired, clear-eyed look that broke his heart a little every time. Dad, she said, You never do anything without a reason. So I figure you have a reason. He looked at his daughter across the cereal bowls and the horse drawing and the lopsided braid. And he thought, I do not deserve this kid. I do, he said. I promise. She nodded once. She went back to the horse. He finally drank his coffee. It was cold. He didn't care. 3 days later, Victoria Bennett knocked on the door of Ethan's house at 7:45 on a Saturday morning. And Lily opened it before Ethan could get there from the kitchen. Because Lily always beat him to the door. Victoria was standing on the front step in dark slacks and a gray coat, holding a bakery box, and she looked for the first and only time Ethan would observe this, in their early weeks together, genuinely uncertain. Not nervous in the way of someone who doesn't know what to say. Nervous in the way of someone who has walked into a room where the rules are completely different from every room they've ever been in. Lily looked at the box, then at Victoria, then at the box again. Are those donuts? She said. Victoria blinked. They are. Glazed, mostly. There are 2 chocolate ones. I like the chocolate ones. I was told, Victoria said, and glanced briefly at Ethan over Lily's head, because Ethan had in fact mentioned it during one of their logistics calls earlier that week, half as information and half as a test to see if she was actually listening. She had been listening. Lily stepped back from the door and said, You can come in the tone of someone granting an important official permission. And Victoria stepped inside, and Ethan were to take in the house, the framed photos on the hallway wall, the dog-eared books on the side table, the crayons on the coffee table, the general warm chaos of a home where a child actually lived, and he watched something happen in her face that he couldn't quite name. Not discomfort. Something more like recognition. Like she was seeing something she'd forgotten existed. Chester came around the corner from the kitchen, his 3 remaining legs doing their usual syncopated rhythm, and stopped in front of Victoria and regarded her with the frank assessment that dogs reserve for strangers. Victoria crouched down, slowly, carefully. She extended her hand. Knuckles first, the correct way to approach a dog you don't know. And Chester sniffed her for a long moment, and then did something he almost never did with new people. He leaned into her hand. Lily, watching, made a small sound of approval. Chester doesn't like most people, she said. I'll take that as a good sign, Victoria said, and stood back up, and there was something in her expression, now something quieter and less guarded. Like the CEO armor had slipped 3 inches, and Ethan filed it away without comment. They sat at the kitchen table. Lily ate both chocolate donuts, which Ethan noted but decided not to fight. Victoria drank black coffee and answered Lily's questions, which came in a steady, systematic stream that Ethan recognized as his daughter's version of due diligence. What kind of music do you like? Classical, mostly. Some jazz. Do you know any Taylor Swift? I know of her. That's not the same. No, Victoria agreed. It isn't. A brief pause. No. Do you want them? Lily, Ethan said. It's fine, Victoria said. She looked at Lily steadily. I never thought I would. I was always more focused on work. But I think lately I've been thinking that I may have gotten the order of priorities wrong. Lily considered this. My teacher says it's never too late to learn something new. Your teacher sounds wise. She's okay. She gives too much homework. Victoria almost smiled. Ethan caught at the very edge of it before she pulled it back. What do I call you? Lily asked. What would you like to call me? Lily thought about it with genuine seriousness, chewing the last of her donut. Not Mom, she said. I have a mom, understood. Not Ms. Bennett either. That's weird if you're married to my dad. Also understood. Can I just call you Victoria? Yes, Victoria said. You can call me Victoria. Lily nodded, satisfied. She picked up her orange juice. Okay, she said. I think this is going to be fine. Ethan looked at his daughter. He looked at Victoria. He looked back at his daughter. He thought, I genuinely do not know what is happening. But somehow it seems to be working. The announcement went out 2 weeks later. Victoria's PR team released a joint statement from both of them. Ethan had approved the language. which had been carefully drafted to be warm without being saccharine, and within 48 hours. The story had been picked up by every major business publication and a significant portion of the general news cycle. The coverage was not kind. The business press questioned Victoria's judgment. There were think pieces about power imbalances and whether a CEO marrying an employee was appropriate. There were commentary pieces that focused, in language that tried to be professional but wasn't, on the fact that Victoria was a plus-size woman who had, as one particularly odious columnist put it, unexpectedly secured a younger partner. There were pieces that focused entirely on Ethan, his salary, his job, his small house, his used truck, and framed all of it as evidence that Victoria was either being manipulated or had made a desperate choice. Ethan read 2 of these articles and then stopped reading them. The employees of Bennett Global were a different matter. The building had its own ecosystem, its own rumor channels, its own informal intelligence network, and by the end of the first day, Ethan was aware that approximately every person he worked with had an opinion about what was happening, and none of them were asking him about it directly, which meant they were all talking about it to each other instead. Marcus found him in the parking lot at the end of his shift. So Marcus said. So Ethan said. The whole building thinks you've lost your mind. Yeah. Have you? Ethan thought about it. Maybe a little is this. Marcus paused, looking for the word. Is this a real thing? Or is this it's a real marriage, Ethan said. Because that part, at least, was literally true. The rest of it, we're figuring out as we go. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. You know what I think? Marcus said. Tell me. I think you're the most unmoney-motivated person I've ever met in my life. And you're doing something that has serious money attached to it. Which means you're not actually doing it for the money. Ethan said nothing. You like her, Marcus said. Not accusingly. Just observationally. I respect her. Those aren't always different things. Ethan unlocked his truck. Get back to work, Marcus. I'm off the clock. Then go home. Marcus was grinning as Ethan pulled out of the lot. The move happened on a Friday. Victoria's house estate was probably the more accurate word. A 6-bedroom property on 3 acres outside the city had been prepared for them. There was a room for Lily that Victoria's interior team had furnished. And when Lily walked into it for the first time, she stopped in the doorway and was silent for a full 10 seconds. It was a good room. It had a window seat and bookshelves and a desk and a reading lamp and walls painted the exact shade of blue-green that Lily had once described as her favorite color in a car conversation that Ethan only barely remembered having. He looked at the room and looked at Victoria, who was standing slightly behind him. And he said quietly, How did you know what color, I asked you? Victoria said. 3 weeks ago. You mentioned she'd described it once as the color of the bottom of the ocean where the sunlight barely reaches. He stared at her. I paid attention, she said, with the straightforward manner she used for most things, and moved past him into the hallway before he could figure out what to say to that. Lily turned around from the window seat, and her face was the face she made on Christmas morning. That involuntary, unguarded, entirely honest face that kids only make when they're genuinely surprised by something good. Is this actually mine? She said. It is, Victoria said. For how long? There was a beat, a small, telling beat that only Ethan caught. For as long as you need it, Victoria said. And her voice was even and certain. And Ethan did not know, standing in the hallway of a house he hadn't imagined living in 6 weeks ago, whether that was the arrangement talking or whether it was something else. He chose not to examine it too closely, not yet. The first real test came 10 days later, at a dinner hosted by one of Bennett Global's largest investors. A man named Gerald Whitmore, who had made his money in manufacturing and spent it in a way designed to make sure everyone was aware of exactly how much there was of it. The dinner was at his home, which was the kind of home that makes you feel underdressed the moment you walk into it. Ethan wore the suit Victoria's team had arranged for him. He'd objected initially, and she'd told him with the efficiency of someone who did not have time for ego to please just try it on. and had tried it on, and it had fit in a way his own suits never had, because it was made specifically for him. Cut to his actual body, and there was a difference between clothes that fit you and clothes that were made for you. And he had not fully understood that difference until that moment, in front of the mirror. He looked like himself, just a better-dressed version. Victoria, beside him, said nothing. She just looked at him briefly and then away, which he was starting to learn was her version of a compliment. At the dinner, Ethan was introduced to 9 people in the first 20 minutes. Finance executives, board members of peripheral companies, a senator, briefly, who shook his hand with the automatic warmth of a man who shakes 100 hands a day and feels none of them. Every introduction included a version of the same thing: the slight pause, the careful recalibration, the glance that moved from Victoria to Ethan and back and tried to solve the equation in real time. Ethan had done enough people reading in his life to catch it every time. He was used to being underestimated. He had been underestimated by teachers and bosses and ex-in-laws and every person who had ever looked at his job title or his address and drawn a conclusion. He had made a kind of peace with it. He understood that people built stories out of limited information and that the stories were often wrong and that this was not usually worth fighting. What he was not prepared for was Richard Hale. Hale was 63 years old, silver-haired, with the specific kind of confidence that comes from spending decades in rooms where you're always the most powerful person present. He found Ethan at the bar between the appetizers and the main course, while Victoria was across the room in conversation with Whitmore himself. And he did something very deliberate. He introduced himself. "Richard Hale," he said, extending his hand. "Ethan Parker." They shook. Hale's grip was the kind of grip that men use as communication. "I know who you are," Hale said. He had a drink in his other hand, and the posture of a man who was absolutely relaxed and absolutely calculating at the same time. "I've been curious about you. I tend to be pretty boring in person," Ethan said. Hale smiled. It didn't reach his eyes, I doubt that. "A man who goes from fleet mechanic to CEO's husband in 6 weeks, that takes a particular kind of skill set. Or good timing," Ethan said. "Or knowing an opportunity when you see one." There it was. The real sentence, delivered pleasantly, with plausible deniability wrapped around a very specific accusation. Ethan looked at him. He kept his expression even. He thought about what Victoria had told him about Hale, the memos, the board campaign, the 2 years of systematic effort to dismantle what she'd built, and he felt something that he didn't often feel, which was a clean, uncomplicated dislike. "That's an interesting way to describe falling in love," Ethan said. Hale tilted his head slightly. "Is that what happened? What else would it be? People marry for all kinds of reasons." "Sure," Ethan said. "But I didn't." He picked up his water glass. "Nice meeting you, Mr. Hale." He walked away from the bar, back across the room toward where Victoria was standing. And he did not look back, because looking back would have told Hale something. And he had no interest in giving the man anything. Victoria saw him coming. She read his face in the way he was beginning to notice. She did quickly, accurately, like she was running a very fast calculation, and when he reached her side, she leaned toward him slightly. Just slightly, and said under her breath, "Hale?" "Hale," he confirmed. "What did he say?" "He implied you married me because I was an opportunity seeker." "What did you say?" "I said I married you because I fell in love with you." There was a brief silence. Whitmore was being drawn away by another guest, and they were momentarily without audience. Victoria looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully read. "That was the right answer," she said. "I know." Did it feel strange to say? He thought about it honestly. Because she'd asked honestly, and that was something he was finding about her. She asked things like she actually wanted to know the answer. Not like she was performing the act of asking. "Less strange than I expected," he said. She looked at him for a second longer than necessary. Then she turned back to the room, to the performance, to the business of being who they needed to be tonight. But her shoulder, Ethan noticed, was now approximately 1 inch closer to his than it had been before. He noticed. He didn't say anything about it. He just stayed close. The ceremony was on a Saturday, 4 weeks after the announcement. The guest list was 200 people, which was 200 more than Ethan had ever imagined being present at any wedding he was part of. There was a string quartet. There were floral arrangements that cost more than his truck. There was a photographer whose hourly rate made Ethan briefly close his eyes. His mother Ruth had flown in from Columbus. Ruth Parker was 68 years old, 5'2", and had raised 2 sons on a teacher's pension and the conviction that character was worth more than money. She had said very little when Ethan called to tell her about the marriage, which was how he knew she had a lot to say that she was waiting to deliver in person. She delivered it in the hotel room, the morning of the wedding, while Ethan was knotting his tie for the 4th time. "I'm going to ask you something," Ruth said, from the chair by the window. "And I need you to give me a real answer. Mom, Ethan Michael Parker. I have been patient for 4 weeks. I want a real answer." He stopped fighting the tie. "Ask," he said. "Do you have feelings for this woman? Real ones? Not gratitude, not respect feelings." He looked at his reflection. "I don't know yet," he said. "That's not a no," Ruth said. "It's not a yes either." "No," she said slowly. "But it's not a no." She paused. "She's a good woman." He thought about the ocean-colored room. He thought about Chester leaning into her hand. He thought about a board of directors and a fight that she was winning on honesty and guts, and about the way she'd said Lily's name in their very first conversation, not as an afterthought, not as a complication, but as a fact that mattered. "Yeah," he said. "I think she's a good woman." "Then fix your tie," his mother said, "and go marry her." He fixed the tie. Victoria was not the kind of woman who cried. She was not the kind of woman who let things surprise her. She had run board meetings during which people tried to humiliate her, and she had not flinched. She had read articles about herself that would have broken someone else, and she had used them as fuel. She had built a billion-dollar company from a desk in a 2-room office, and she had done it without ever once showing the room that she was afraid. She was afraid right now, not of the cameras or the board members in the 3rd row or the journalists she recognized near the back. Not of Hale, who was seated near the aisle with an expression of studied neutrality. She was afraid because the man waiting at the end of the aisle was real. Not real the way the contract was real. Real the way an actual human being is real, with a daughter who drew horses, and a 3-legged dog, and a mother who had looked at Victoria over breakfast that morning with eyes that said, "I see you clearly and I'm deciding what to think," and a way of listening to people that made you feel like what you were saying was the only thing in the room. She had not planned for him to be real. That had not been part of the arrangement. She walked down the aisle on her own, because there was no one to give her away, because she had never needed anyone to give her anything. The string quartet played. 200 people watched her. The board members watched her. The cameras watched her. She watched Ethan. He was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen before, not the careful, professional attention he used at work, not the gentle watchfulness he used with Lily. Something quieter than both of those things. Something that looked, uncomfortably and inexplicably, like he was glad she was coming toward him. She reached him. The officiant began. At some point in the middle of the ceremony, when the formal language had settled into something quieter, Ethan leaned very slightly toward her, not enough for the cameras to necessarily catch, not enough to be theatrical, and said, low enough that only she could hear, "You okay?" She looked straight ahead at the officiant. "I'm fine," she said. "Your hands are shaking a little." She tightened her grip on the flowers. "They're not, Victoria," she exhaled. She looked at him sideways, quickly, and then away. "I'm fine," she said again, but differently this time, softer. "I will be." He nodded once. He didn't make a thing of it. He just turned back to the officiant, and his arm shifted almost imperceptibly closer to hers, and the shaking gradually stopped. Later that evening, At the reception, after the dinner and the toasts and the first dance which they got through by mutual silent agreement of just focus on the basic steps and don't think about anything else, Ethan found Victoria standing at the edge of the room, holding a glass of water, watching Lily asleep in a chair in the corner with his mother's cardigan draped over her. He stood beside her. "She passed out 45 minutes ago," he said. "Apparently champagne fountains are very overstimulating." "She had sparkling water," Victoria said. "I made sure. I know she told me. She said it was you." He paused. "You didn't have to do that." She was reaching for the wrong glass. Still, Victoria looked at Lily's sleeping face. The 8-year-old who had called her Victoria on day one and meant it as a compliment, who had approved her based on donut selection and Chester's opinion and a series of direct, fair questions. Who had said this is going to be fine with the authority of someone who had decided. "She trusts easily," Victoria said. "For someone who's been let down, she trusts carefully," Ethan said. "There's a difference. She watches first. She decided about you. She doesn't decide easily." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "She decided about me," she said. "Week 1, Ethan said. She told me you were, and I'm quoting, actually a person and not just a boss." Victoria said nothing. She looked at the sleeping child in the chair. "Ethan," she said. "Yeah, I meant what I said. About being present for her." She paused. I don't say things I don't mean. I know. I just want to make sure you know that part wasn't strategic." He looked at her sideways. In the reception light, without the full armor of the working day, she looked different. Not less powerful. Something more. Actually, like the power was real rather than performed. "I know," he said again. She nodded once. She looked back at Lily. And they stood there, the two of them, in the middle of the party they'd built for an audience, watching a little girl sleep under a borrowed cardigan. And neither of them said anything else for a long time. Because sometimes the thing that's happening is too new and too fragile to put into words. And the kindest thing you can do for it is just let it breathe. 3 weeks into the marriage, Ethan learned something about Victoria Bennett that her board of directors, her executive team, and every journalist who had ever profiled her had completely missed. She couldn't sleep. He figured it out by accident. He was a light sleeper by nature. 4 years of single parenting had trained him to wake at the sound of a door, a cough, a child's footstep on a hallway floor, and twice in the first week he'd heard movement in the house at 2 in the morning and gone still in his bed, listening before realizing it was Victoria, not Lily, not Chester. Victoria, moving through the house in the quiet hours, doing something with herself that she clearly did not intend for anyone to witness. The third time it happened, on a Wednesday night in the second week, he got up. He found her in the kitchen, sitting at the island with her laptop open and a cup of tea gone cold beside her, reading what appeared to be a financial brief. She was in a plain gray robe, her hair loose, her reading glasses on. He had not known about the glasses. She never wore them at work, and she looked up when he appeared in the doorway with the expression sucked in of someone who has been caught at something. "I didn't wake you," she said immediately. Not a question. A defense. "You didn't," he said. "I just wake up." He went to the cabinet, found the kettle, filled it. She watched him do this without speaking. "You don't have to," she started. "I'm already up," he said. "You want fresh tea?" A pause. "Yes, thank you." He made tea. He sat across from her at the island, not at the other end, but across close enough to talk at a normal volume, far enough to give her room. Chester had followed him down and settled under the island, with a heavy sigh that communicated his feelings about 2 in the morning kitchen visits. "How often?" he said. "How often what?" "The not sleeping." Victoria wrapped both hands around the fresh mug. "Often enough." "How long has it been like this?" She looked at him over the glasses. "Why? Because you're running a billion-dollar company on whatever sleep you get between work and 2 a.m. financial briefs. And I live here now, so it seems relevant." The corner of her mouth did something. Not quite a smile, but close. "Since I was about 30, she said. "Give or take. I've learned to function on 5 hours. That's not functioning. Ethan said. That's managing. Is there a difference? Yeah. Functioning means you're okay. Managing means you're getting through. She looked at him. She was doing the thing she did, sometimes the rapid, careful assessment, reading his face the way she read a document, looking for the relevant information buried in the surface text. You do that a lot, he said. Do what? Look at people like you're trying to find the catch. She didn't answer immediately. She looked down at her tea. Old habit, she said. From what? From years of being in rooms where most people wanted something from me. She paused. You get to where you assume there's always an angle. Even when there isn't one. There isn't one, Ethan said. I'm just up because I'm always up at 2 a.m. when there's someone awake in the house. It's a dad thing. She looked at him again. Differently this time, something slower in it. Something that was working through a recalibration she hadn't expected to need. A dad thing, she said. You get tuned in to the sounds of the house. Who's awake? Who's not? It becomes automatic. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, very carefully, like she was testing the words before she used them, does it bother you? Being here? The adjustment? To the house? To all of it. He thought about it honestly. The house is an adjustment, he said. I keep reaching for the coffee where it used to be, and it's not there. Little stuff. But no, it doesn't bother me. And the bigger stuff? The bigger stuff is what it is. We said we'd figure it out. We're figuring it out. She nodded slowly. She closed the laptop. It was the first time he'd seen her close the laptop voluntarily. At any hour. Lily asked me something yesterday, Victoria said. Ethan went still slightly. Yeah? She asked if I was happy. He waited. I didn't know what to say, Victoria said. Which is, I know that sounds strange. I run company-wide strategy meetings. I've testified before state regulatory committees. And an 8-year-old asked me if I was happy, and I genuinely did not know what to say. What did you tell her? I told her I was working on it. Ethan was quiet for a second. That's actually a pretty good answer, she said. That means not yet, but you're trying. Yeah, he said. That's Lily. She's Victoria stopped, started again. She's remarkable. She doesn't miss anything. I know she got that from you. Ethan looked at his tea. She got the best parts from herself, he said. I just tried not to screw up the rest. Victoria smiled then. A real one, not the professionally deployed version. Small and real and slightly surprised by itself, like it caught her off guard. It was the first time he'd seen that smile. He filed it away. The next week was when things started to shift, and not in the way either of them had mapped out. The shift started on a Thursday afternoon when Lily came home from school with a permission slip for a father-daughter science night that she needed signed. And while she was looking for a pen, she knocked over the vase on the hall table, which shattered, and her face went through 5 different things in about 2 seconds. The shock, the guilt, the preemptive flinch that broke Ethan's heart every time he saw it, the waiting for the response. Victoria came out of her office at the sound of the crash. Lily looked at her. It was instinct, the way kids look at the adults in the room when something goes wrong, taking a reading before they decide how to react. Victoria looked at the broken vase. She looked at Lily's face, and she said, calmly and without a single moment of blame, that vase was ugly anyway. I only kept it because it was a gift, and I didn't know how to get rid of it. You've actually helped me. Lily blinked. Really? Are you cut? No good. Let's get the broom. They swept up the broken vase together. Lily holding the dustpan, Victoria using the broom with the focus of someone taking the task completely seriously. And by the end of it, Lily was telling her about the science night and what the experiment was going to be and whether she thought static electricity was more interesting than magnetism. And Victoria was asking follow-up questions, real ones. And Ethan stood in the hallway and watched and felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't fully known was tight. Later that night, after Lily was in bed, he knocked on Victoria's office door. Yeah, she said. He opened the door. She was at her desk. Back in work mode, glasses on, 3 documents open on screen. She looked up. That was good today. With the vase, she seemed almost puzzled by the observation. It was just a vase. She braces herself, he said. When she breaks something, or does something wrong. She has this, he paused, finding the right words. She holds herself tight for a second, waiting for the reaction. She's been doing it since Sandra left. I don't know if she thinks everyone's going to be unpredictable now. Or what, but she braces. Victoria had gone very still. And today she didn't, Ethan said. Not after you responded. She didn't brace for the second hit, she just relaxed into it. He looked at Victoria steadily. That matters. I wanted you to know. Victoria said nothing for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful in a way he was starting to recognize as the sound of her trying, not to show something. I didn't plan it, she said, I just responded. I know, he said. That's why it worked. He closed the door softly behind him. He didn't hear her work until 3 that morning. He didn't hear the kettle either. She slept. He didn't know why that meant what it did to him. But it did. The board meeting was set for 5 weeks out. The pressure had not let up. It had in fact increased. Hale had been quiet in the weeks since the wedding, which Victoria had told Ethan was the version of him she trusted least. Hale quiet meant Hale building something. She was right. On a Monday morning, 11 days into October, Victoria's assistant Dana appeared in her office doorway at 8:45, with an expression that she was trying to keep professional and was not quite managing, and said, "You need to see something." The something was a website. Not a major publication, not a recognized media outlet, a purpose-built, anonymous site that had gone live sometime over the weekend. It contained a series of documents and what appeared to be correspondence, and it was titled, with the precision of someone who understood exactly what language would do the most damage. The Bennett arrangement. How Ohio's biggest CCO bought herself a husband. Ethan found out about it at 9:15 when Marcus texted him 3 question marks and a link. He read it in the break room with his coffee going cold in his hand. The site was careful. It didn't allege anything in language that could be easily litigated. It asked questions instead. It presented the timeline of the relationship, the 6 weeks between announcement and ceremony, and asked its readers to consider whether that timelines suggested genuine romance or calculated strategy. It reproduced in edited form a series of internal communications between Victoria and her legal team that appeared to reference a contractual arrangement. It quoted, anonymously, 2 sources who claimed to have knowledge of a business-based marriage agreement. It did not name Ethan directly as complicit. It didn't have to. He put his phone in his pocket. He went back to Truck 11's fuel injector. He worked for 45 minutes without speaking to anyone. Then he took his lunch break early, sat in his truck in the parking lot, and called Victoria. She picked up on the second ring. I know, she said before he could speak. What's the damage? We don't know yet. The board is aware of it. 3 members have already called me this morning. Dana is tracking press pickups. How bad is it? The documents on the site are real, she said. He heard that. The communications between me and legal, those are real documents. Someone got access to them. Her voice was controlled. Completely, deliberately controlled. The way a person sounds when they are holding something together through pure force of will. Someone inside the company, or someone with access to someone inside the company. Hale, Ethan said. Almost certainly. But proving it is a different problem. Victoria, I'm handling it. I'm not calling about whether you're handling it. I'm calling because he stopped. Started again. How are you? Not the company, you. A silence on the line. Longer than normal. I've been better, she said. Is there anything I can do? From here, I mean, today. Don't react publicly. If anyone asks you about it, you don't know anything about any arrangement. Because as far as the public is concerned, there isn't one. She paused. I know that's asking you to Victoria. I know what we signed. I'm not going to blow it up because someone posted a website. I know. I just pause. I'm sorry that you're in this. That it's become this. Don't apologize, he said. We're in it together. What's the next move? she told him. The next move was a statement carefully drafted by her communications team, reviewed by legal, released by 3 that afternoon, that addressed the site's implications directly, without confirming or denying the existence of any formal agreement. It leaned hard into the public narrative of their relationship. It was professionally written and strategically sound. It did not stop the bleeding. By Wednesday, 4 of the 11 board members had signed a letter to the full board, requesting an emergency session to address questions of leadership integrity. It was not a majority. It was not enough to remove her, but it was enough to tell her that the foundation she'd built, the 2 years she'd spent stabilizing her position, the 6 weeks of public marriage, the whole carefully constructed architecture, was cracking under the weight of one anonymous website. Ethan found out about the letter Thursday morning when Victoria came into the kitchen at 6 a.m. while he was making Lily's lunch, sat down at the island, and said nothing for 45 seconds, which was the longest he'd ever heard Victoria Bennett not talk. He made her coffee. He set it in front of her. He finished Lily's lunch. 4 board members, she said. Yeah, I have 7 who are solid. That's a majority. But it's a smaller majority than I had a month ago. And it only takes 1 more to flip and we're in trouble. Who's shakeable? Patricia Nguyen. She's been with me for 3 years, but she hates controversy. She avoids it wherever possible. If this keeps escalating, she might decide the cleanest solution is to back the motion and distance herself from the mess. What does Patricia care about? Beyond avoiding controversy, Victoria looked at him. What do you mean? She's been with you 3 years. She chose you 3 years ago for a reason. What was the reason? Victoria was quiet, thinking. She cares about the company's direction. She supported my infrastructure expansion into the Southeast because she believed in the long-term vision. Then talk to her about the long-term vision, Ethan said. Not the website, not Hale, not the marriage, the vision. Remind her why she chose you in the first place. Victoria looked at him in a way that was becoming familiar, the rapid recalibration, the slight surprise of someone who had expected a different angle. You're not, she started. I'm not a business strategist, he said. I know. But I've been in enough situations where the problem on the surface isn't the real problem. You have to find what she actually cares about and speak to that. When did you get smart? She said. But she said it in a way that wasn't dismissive. The way you say it when you're actually impressed and don't entirely know how to show it. I've always been smart, Ethan said. People just didn't always notice because of the work shirts. Victoria almost laughed. It was the closest she'd gotten to 1 in 4 days. She called Patricia Nguyen that afternoon. Lily's school had a fall festival on Saturday. The same weekend the crisis was peaking. It was a small thing, booths. A pumpkin painting contest, the kind of event that is wildly important to an 8-year-old and basically invisible to the adult world. Ethan had marked it on his calendar 6 weeks ago. He'd confirmed with Lily twice that week that he'd be there. It was non-negotiable. Victoria said she was going to stay home. Too much work. Too many calls to manage. Ethan said that was fine. He took Lily to the festival. They painted pumpkins. Lily did a horse, obviously. Ethan did a very poor rendition of Chester that made Lily laugh hard enough that she knocked over her paint cup. At 12:45, while Lily was at the cider pressing station with her friend Maya, Ethan felt his phone buzz. He checked it. It was a photo from Dana. Victoria in the parking lot of the elementary school, in the dark coat, looking at the entrance like she was deciding something. He typed back, "She's at the cider station. Second building on the left." 3 minutes later, Victoria appeared at his elbow. She had a pumpkin under her arm, already painted. He looked at it. It was a very competent, surprisingly detailed painting of Chester all 4 legs, which was technically incorrect and which made it somehow more charming. "You painted Chester with 4 legs, Ethan said. "Chester deserves 4 legs in art. Even if life was less generous," she said. "He'll be devastated when he hears you showed up to paint him without asking. He's a dog. He has feelings." Lily, Returning from the cider station with 2 cups and the energy of someone who had just discovered that pressing apples is the greatest thing humanity has invented. Stopped when she saw Victoria. She looked at the pumpkin. She looked at Victoria. "You came," she said. "I had a free hour," Victoria said. Lily looked at the pumpkin again. "Is that Chester? It was supposed to be. He's got 4 legs. He does. That's not right." "No," Victoria said. "But I thought he'd prefer it." Lily took this in. She handed Victoria one of the cider cups. "You can be on our team for the decorating contest," she said, with the authority of someone who had just made an important executive decision. "We need someone who does details." "I'm decent at details," Victoria said. "I know," Lily said. "Dad told me." And she was off again. Back into the festival, the cup of cider already half gone. Victoria looked at Ethan. "You told her I was decent at details?" she said. "I told her you pay attention," he said. "Same thing." She looked at him for a second. Not the assessment look, something quieter. "I had a free hour," she said again. "I know," he said. "You told me. That's actually why I came." "Okay. Ethan." "Yeah, I didn't have a free hour." He looked at her. "I moved 4 calls," she said. "I told Dana to push the afternoon brief." She stopped. She looked somewhere past him, past the festival, into the middle distance, where people go when they're being honest with themselves about something uncomfortable. "I didn't want to miss it." He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. She turned back to the festival, to where Lily was waving them over, and she walked toward her. And Ethan followed, and the 3 of them spent 2 hours at a school fall festival in Ohio, painting pumpkins and drinking too much cider. And not one photograph of it was taken by anyone with a camera. And not one moment of it was for the board or the media or the narrative. It was just real. That evening, after Lily was in bed, Ethan came downstairs to find Victoria sitting on the couch with Chester's head in her lap, which was unusual enough that he stopped in the doorway. Chester did not put his head in people's laps. Chester was a floor dog, a distance dog, a regard-you-from-across-the-room dog. "He just climbed up," Victoria said, as if she needed to explain it. "He doesn't do that." "I know. He did it anyway." Ethan sat in the chair across from her. Chester's tail moved once. "Ethan," Victoria said. "Yeah. I need to tell you something." He waited. "The website," she said. "The documents. Someone got access to our legal communications. That means someone close to this. Close to me gave Hale something." She paused. "I've been going through the access logs for 3 days. Whoever it was had clearance. It was someone I trusted. Do you know who? I have a strong suspicion. I'm not going to say it until I'm sure, because if I'm right, it's going to." She stopped, and for the first time since he'd known her, in the careful fortified architecture of who Victoria Bennett presented to the world, he saw something come apart. Not dramatically, not in tears or raised voices. Just a crack, small and precise in the composure. "It's James," she said quietly, "my VP of Operations. He's been with me 7 years." Ethan said nothing. He was the one who argued hardest for giving me more time when the board first raised questions about my position. He was the first person I told about the marriage plan. She stopped. I trusted him. He was the first person I called. "Victoria, I know," she said. "I know what this looks like. I built something and I brought the wrong people inside it, and I should have known better." "Or," Ethan said, slowly, "you trusted someone and they made a choice that had nothing to do with whether trusting them was reasonable. People betray people. It's not always because the person who trusted them was naive." She looked at him. "It's not on you that he made a bad choice," Ethan said. "I should have seen it." "Why? Because you're supposed to see everything." He leaned forward. "You're not a machine, Victoria. You're a person running a company under constant attack, trying to hold together something you built with your own hands. And you trusted someone who turned out to be worth less than you thought. That's a human experience. It's not a failure of your intelligence." She looked at him for a long time. Chester's tail moved again. "How do you do that?" she said. "Do what?" Say the exact thing that cuts through everything. I just say what's true. Most people don't. Most people are afraid of what's true. She looked at Chester's head in her lap. She moved her hand slowly, and Chester sighed the deep, settled sigh of a dog who is exactly where he wants to be. I need to fire James tomorrow, she said. Do you have enough to prove it? Yes. The access logs are conclusive. Legal has reviewed them. Then yes, Ethan said. Tomorrow. And then the board meeting is in 3 weeks. We'll handle the board meeting. She looked up at him. We, she said, not challenging, just taking note of it. Yeah, he said. We. She nodded slowly. Something settled in her face. Not peace exactly. Not resolution. Just the particular calm that comes when you realize you don't have to carry a thing entirely alone. I'm sorry about your friends, Ethan said. The people you thought were in your corner. James wasn't exactly a friend. He was close enough that it hurts. She looked at her hands. Yes, she said. It does. They sat there a while. Not saying much. Chester between them in his accidental ambassadorial role, doing more diplomatic work than most humans could manage. And then something happened that neither of them had predicted. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, holding the stuffed elephant she technically didn't carry anymore since she was 8 and felt that was too old, which appeared at significant emotional moments. And she said, I can't sleep. Victoria started to shift, to lift Chester, to give Ethan space to handle it. Come here, Bug, Ethan said. But Lily came down the stairs and walked past him, and went to Victoria and climbed up on the couch beside her, with the absolute confidence of a child who has decided something, and tucked herself against Victoria's side, and said, You feel sad. Victoria went very still. You don't have to tell me why, Lily said. You can just sit here. Ethan watched his daughter, who had lost her mother to a version of leaving that had nothing to do with death and everything to do with choice, put her head on Victoria Bennett's shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. And he watched Victoria Bennett, who had spent 41 years building walls between herself and the kind of thing that could hurt her, lift her arm and put it around an 8-year-old and hold on. Not for the cameras, not for the board, not for the narrative. Just because she needed to, and Lily had offered, and sometimes that's all it takes for something that was supposed to be pretend to become the most real thing in the room. James Whitfield was escorted from the building on a Friday morning at 9:47, and Victoria watched it happen from her office window without saying a word. She had handled the termination herself. No HR intermediary, no delegated authority. She had called James into her office at 9, set the access logs on the desk between them, and watched his face move through denial, and then recalibration, and then something that looked almost like relief. Like a man who had been carrying something heavy and had finally been caught and could put it down. He had not apologized. He had said, with the specific bitterness of someone who believed their grievance justified their action, You were going to lose it anyway, Victoria. I was just accelerating the inevitable, she had said. Clean out your office. Security will walk you out. 7 years. That was what 7 years of loyalty looked like when the pressure got high enough. Dana appeared in the doorway at 10. The board has been notified, she said. Patricia Nguyen called. She wants a conversation before the meeting. Set it for this afternoon, Victoria said, still looking out the window, and Ethan called. Victoria turned around. He said to tell you, and I'm quoting directly, Chester knocked over his water bowl this morning, and then looked extremely guilty, and then looked at me like it was my fault. Thought you should know. Victoria stared at Dana. Dana held her expression completely steady. Those were his words exactly. Ms. Bennett, tell him. I'll address the Chester situation at dinner, Victoria said. She went back to her desk. She picked up the first file on the stack. And for just a moment, before the CEO mask sealed itself back into place, something in her expression softened into something that was not professional and not strategic and not calculated at all. Dana saw it. She said nothing about it. She closed the door quietly behind her. And she was smiling, and she never mentioned it to anyone. The conversation with Patricia Nguyen lasted 40 minutes. Victoria didn't go in with a presentation or a prepared argument or a set of talking points. She went in with the infrastructure expansion numbers from the previous 2 years, 1 page of projections for the Southeast Corridor, and the same directness she used when talking to Ethan at 2 in the morning. She sat across from Patricia in the small conference room and said, "Tell me what you need to feel confident in this." Patricia was a careful woman, precise in her language, who had made her career in logistics finance and had a habit of letting silences run long enough to make most people fill them nervously. She let this one run for about 10 seconds. Then she said, "I need to know whether what was on that website is true." "What specifically?" "The suggestion that this marriage is a business arrangement designed to manage the board situation." Victoria looked at her directly. "We met and moved quickly," she said. "The timeline looks suspicious from the outside." "I understand that. That's not an answer." Victoria agreed. "It isn't." She paused. "What I can tell you is that the man I married is in my house every night. His daughter does homework at my kitchen table. His dog has claimed the left side of the living room couch. Whatever this marriage started as, what it is now is real in every way that matters." Patricia studied her. "That's also not exactly a direct answer." "Patricia, you've known me for 3 years. Have I ever told you something that wasn't true?" A pause. "No," Patricia said. "Then trust what you know about me and not what an anonymous website wants you to conclude." Victoria slid the infrastructure projections across the table. "And look at what we've built. This is what the next 4 years looks like if the company stays on course. That's what you signed on for. That's what Hale would dismantle in 18 months if he gets control." Patricia looked at the projections for a long moment. "The meeting is in 3 weeks," she said. "I know, I need to think." "I know that too." Victoria stood. "Patricia, don't make this decision based on what protects you from controversy. Make it based on what protects what we built." She left the conference room. She didn't look back. By the time she got home that evening, she was operating on adrenaline and very little else. She had been awake since 5. She had fired a 7-year employee, managed a board communication crisis, held a critical alliance conversation, and reviewed 11 documents that legal needed responses on by Monday morning. She walked in the front door at 7:15. From the kitchen she could hear voices. Lily's voice, animated and running fast the way it did when she was in the middle of explaining something important. And Ethan's voice lower, asking questions at the right intervals to keep her going. Victoria stood in the hallway for a moment and just listened. "But if the magnet is already at maximum capacity," Lily was saying, "then adding more iron filings doesn't make it stronger. It just makes it look bigger, which is different." "That's a very good distinction," Ethan said. "It's a huge distinction. Volume and strength are not the same thing." Mrs. Patterson said they were basically the same, and I said I thought they weren't. And she said, "Well, that's an interesting perspective," and I said, "But is it correct though?" What did she say to that? She said we'd explore it further. Which means she's going to look it up. How do you know? Because that's what adults say when they need time to look something up. Ethan laughed. Actually laughed. The real version, not the polite version. Victoria walked into the kitchen. Both of them looked up. Lily's face did the thing it did now when Victoria appeared, the immediate, uncomplicated lighting up that still caught Victoria off guard every single time, because no one had ever looked at her arrival as something to be glad about before, not without wanting something first. "Victoria," Lily said, "do you think volume and strength are the same thing?" "Categorically not," Victoria said, setting her bag on the island. "See," Lily said to Ethan, with enormous satisfaction. Ethan met Victoria's eyes across the kitchen. The look was brief and complete, and contained about 6 different things that neither of them had found language for yet. "There's food," he said. "Whenever you're ready." "Give me 10 minutes," she said. She went upstairs. She changed out of the work clothes. She washed her face. She stood in the bathroom for a moment, looking at herself in the mirror. Not at the CEO, Not at the public figure, just at a woman who was 41 years old and more tired than she usually admitted, and who had, somewhere between the contract signing and this Tuesday evening, started looking forward to coming home. That realization sat in her chest like a stone dropped into still water. She went back downstairs. They ate dinner at the kitchen table. The three of them plus Chester monitoring for dropped food. And Lily explained the entire magnet experiment in detail. And Ethan told them about Truck 23's suspension issue. And Victoria told them about James, the edited version. Not the operational crisis version, just the human version. The way you explain to people at a table that someone you trusted turned out to be different than you thought. Lily listened with the seriousness she brought to everything important. "Was he your friend?" she asked. "I thought so," Victoria said. "That's the worst kind of not friend," Lily said. "The kind that looks like a friend first." Victoria looked at her. "Yeah," she said, "it is. My friend Zoe did that in second grade. She told everyone my drawing of a horse looked like a potato. I'm sorry. It didn't. It looked like a horse." Lily pointed her fork at Victoria. "Yours would have looked like a horse. Your Chester pumpkin was actually really good." Victoria felt something so unexpected and disproportionate to the moment move through her chest that she had to look down at a plate for a second to manage it. "Thank you," she said. "That means a lot." "I'm serious," Lily said. "You got the ears right. Most people mess up the ears." After dinner, after Lily was in bed, Ethan found Victoria in the back sitting room with a glass of wine and a case file she wasn't reading. He sat down across from her and said, without preamble, "How bad is it?" Honestly, she closed the file. "The board meeting is in 3 weeks. I have 7 solid votes. I need 8 to kill the motion. Patricia is undecided. If she goes with Hale, we're at a deadlock. If we're at a deadlock, there are mechanisms that go into play that could effectively paralyze leadership for months. Which Hale knows. Which is the point. What does Patricia need? Time. Evidence. Confidence that backing me isn't a liability. What would give her that? If the narrative shifts. If the public story moves from CEO in a suspect marriage to something else. What else? Victoria looked at him. Honestly, the most useful thing would be a genuine show of unity. Not a press release. Something real that people can see and believe. Ethan was quiet for a moment. "What does that look like?" "There's a company gala in 2 weeks. Annual investor dinner. It's always covered. If we showed up not as a PR exercise, but as people who are actually visibly, genuinely okay, that would help. Then we go, Ethan. We were going to go anyway." "That's not a hardship," he paused. "But I need you to do something." "What?" "Stop managing me," he said. She looked at him. "You do it," he said, not unkindly. "You frame things as logistics and strategy and optics because that feels safer than just asking me directly. You don't have to manage me, Victoria. We're on the same side." She was very still. "I know that," she said. "Then act like it." It was not a harsh thing to say. He said it evenly, the way he said most things, and it landed not like a rebuke but like an offering, like he was handing her something that required her to receive it. "It's a habit," she said. "Managing people. Controlling the framing. I've been doing it so long I don't always notice. No. Does it bother you?" "Sometimes," he said honestly. "But I also know why you do it, so I just call it out instead of letting it build." She looked at him for a long moment. "Most people don't do that. Most people either don't notice or don't bother. Which is it for you?" "You notice or you bother, both," he said. She nodded slowly. Something in her shoulders came down an inch. "The gala," she said. "Would you want to bring Lily? It's a late event. School night. Dana could arrange something. A sitter. Someone Lily knows and trusts." "She'd need to approve the sitter personally," Ethan said. "She has a process." "What process?" "She asks them what their favorite book is. If they say they don't have one, they don't get a second interview." Victoria blinked. Then she said, "That is the most sensible hiring criterion I have ever heard. Don't tell her that. She'll want to run HR." For the second time that evening, Victoria laughed. Really laughed, the unguarded version. The one that didn't belong to the boardroom, or the press conference, or the carefully managed public image. It lasted about 4 seconds, and when it was over, she looked slightly startled by it, like she'd forgotten what it felt like. Ethan looked at her quietly. "What?" she said, catching his expression. "Nothing. You're doing the thing where you look at me and don't say the thing." "What thing?" "Like you're figuring something out." He considered that. "Maybe," he said. "What are you figuring out?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm figuring out that you're a lot easier to be around than I expected." She held his gaze. "That's a very low bar." "You know what I mean." "I do," she said. And she paused. This was the part where the management instinct kicked in, where she would have reframed it, redirected it, kept it at a professional distance. She made a deliberate choice not to. "I feel the same way." "About you." The room was quiet. Chester snored from the couch. "Okay," Ethan said. "Okay," she said. They sat there for a while longer, and neither of them pushed past the word. But something had been said, and both of them knew it had been said. And sometimes that's exactly enough. The Investor Gala was on a Thursday. It was held at the Harrington Center downtown, a venue that consistently managed to feel both impressive and suffocating. Full of chandeliers and open bars and the particular tension of several hundred small people who were all trying to project confidence at each other simultaneously. Ethan wore the dark suit. Victoria wore a deep burgundy dress that her stylist had selected. And when she came downstairs that evening, Ethan looked up from where he'd been helping Lily interrogate the approved babysitter, a college student named Rachel, who had confirmed that her favorite book was A Wrinkle in Time, which Lily had accepted as satisfactory, and for a moment he lost the thread of whatever he'd been saying. Victoria noticed. She didn't say anything about it. He recovered. "You look professional," she said, giving him the easy word. "That's not what I was going to say." She looked at him. He looked at her. Lily looked at both of them with the expression she deployed when adults were being obvious. "You look great," he said. "Thank you," Victoria said. "So do you." She turned to Lily. "Rachel knows where the emergency numbers are. And the snack protocol," Lily said. "Snack protocol?" "Snack protocol is a list," Ethan said. "It involves designated snack windows and approved items." "Don't ask. I'm genuinely afraid to." "Smart," Rachel said from the couch. And Lily gave her an approving look. They left at 7. In the car, Victoria was quiet, doing what she always did before high-stakes events, running the variables. Mapping the room, preparing for contingencies. Ethan drove. He knew she was running calculations, and he let her run them without interruption. Because he'd learned that she needed that, the way he needed 5 minutes of quiet in his truck, a difficult repair. At a red light, she said, without looking at him, "Hale is going to make a move tonight." "You think?" "He never misses an investor event. And the board meeting is in 9 days. If he's going to manufacture another moment, it's tonight, in front of the people whose opinions matter most." "What kind of move?" "I don't know. That's what worries me." "Whatever it is," Ethan said, "we handle it." She finally looked at him. "You keep saying we. It keeps being true." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Ethan, if this goes wrong tonight, if Hale does something that damages this beyond repair, I want you to know that whatever happens to the company, the agreement holds. Lily's fund, the coverage, that doesn't change." "I know. I want to say it out loud anyway." "Okay, 'cause you trusted me," she said. "And I don't want you to regret that." He looked at her at the next light. "I don't regret it," he said. "Not yet anyway." "Not yet," she repeated, with something that was almost a smile. "Ask me again in 9 days," he said. She nodded. She turned back to the window, and in the glass, faint, but there, he caught the reflection of her expression. And it was not the CEO expression, and it was not the guarded expression, and it was not the professionally composed expression. It was the expression of someone who was quietly, uncertainly, maybe even against her better judgment, hoping for something. He watched the road. He was hoping for it too. Richard Hale arrived at the gala at 8:15. which Ethan clocked because he had made it his quiet business that evening to be aware of where Hale was at all times. He had done this without announcing it to Victoria. The way you do things when you've decided to look out for someone without making it a conversation. Hale moved through the room with practiced ease, the way powerful men do when they know a space belongs to them, or believe it does, which amounted to the same thing in their behavior. He greeted investors with first names and firm handshakes. He laughed at the right moments. He was very good at being in a room. At 8:40, he found his way to the table, where Victoria and Ethan were in conversations with Gerald Whitmore and two of his associates. And he did something that was almost admirable in its audacity. He was warm. He greeted Victoria with apparent goodwill. He shook Ethan's hand as though they were meeting without history. He joined the conversation about regional freight expansion with genuine intelligence and appropriate enthusiasm. And for about 7 minutes, he was simply a senior board member at a company event, collegial and engaged. Then Whitmore's associates stepped away briefly, and the four of them were momentarily grouped together. And Hale said pleasantly, conversationally, like it had just occurred to him, "Victoria, I meant to mention I had a call this week from someone at your former legal firm. Apparently, they've been approached to provide documentation relevant to the board inquiry. The temperature of the moment dropped about 10 degrees. Victoria's face showed nothing. I wasn't aware of a board inquiry. An informal one, Hale said smoothly. Just due diligence, given recent questions about leadership arrangement. He glanced at Ethan with the smile of a man who is absolutely certain of his ground. I'm sure you understand, Ethan. In any organization this size, transparency is everything. Ethan looked at him. He took a breath. He thought about what Victoria had said in the car. He thought about Lily asking Victoria if she was happy, and Victoria saying she was working on it. He thought about Chester's head in Victoria's lap. He thought about a woman who had spent 41 years building walls and had started, quietly, to let them come down. And he thought about the fact that this man across from him had spent 2 years trying to take apart what someone else built, and had recruited a traitor inside her company to do it, and was now standing in the middle of her investor dinner, treating it like a chess piece. Ethan put his hand on Victoria's back. Not a territorial gesture. Not a performance. Just a steadying hand. The kind you put on someone's back when you want them to feel that you're there. She felt it. He knew she felt it. Because something in her spine straightened in a different way, not the armor straightening, but the kind of straightening that happens when someone takes some of the weight. Mr. Hale, Ethan said, keeping his voice completely even. I've noticed something about you. Hale looked at him with the polite interest of someone who does not expect to be surprised. Every time I've been around you, Ethan said, you're talking about what Victoria's doing. Her marriage, her leadership, her arrangements, her transparency. He paused. You run a company too, don't you? How's that going? Something shifted behind Hale's eyes. The warmth adjusted, recalibrated. Bennett Global is my primary board focus, Hale said. Right, Ethan said. Because your own company's eastern expansion stalled out 18 months ago. I looked it up. He said it without heat, without triumph. Just as a fact. I'm not in finance, Mr. Hale. I'm a mechanic. But I know what it looks like when someone's trying to acquire something they can't build themselves. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. Hale's smile did not waver, but his eyes were a different calculation now. Victoria, he said, turning away from Ethan with the smoothness of a man who has lost one exchange and is already moving to the next. We should talk pot before the board meeting. There are ways to resolve this that work for everyone. I'll have Dana call your office, Victoria said. Perfectly level. Hale nodded once and moved away into the room. And he was smiling as he did it, which meant he wasn't done. Which both of them knew. Victoria turned very slightly toward Ethan. She did not look at him directly. She looked at the room. You looked him up, she said. Last week. You didn't tell me. I didn't want to make it a strategy meeting. I just wanted to know who I was dealing with. She was quiet for a moment. The Eastern Expansion detail. Took me about 20 minutes of research. It was effective. It was true, he said. That's different. She looked at him then. Not the assessment look. Something that had run out of protective distance. Ethan, she said. Yeah, thank you. He nodded once. He looked back at the room. Don't thank me yet, he said. He's still here. She almost smiled. She turned back to the room too. And they stood there together, side by side, watching a room full of people who had all come with agendas. And for the first time in 2 months of a marriage that had been built on calculation, Ethan Parker did not feel like he was performing something. He felt like he was exactly where he was. The drive home was quiet for the first 10 minutes. Not uncomfortable quiet, the kind that comes after something hard, when you don't need words for it immediately. Then Victoria said, You didn't have to do that, I know. You inserted yourself into a board-level conflict that isn't technically your problem. It's my problem, he said. You're my wife. She looked at him. He kept his eyes on the road. Even contractually, she said slowly. Even now, he said. She turned back to the window. The city lights moved across her face, and she was quiet, and he could not see her expression, and he did not ask about it. When they got home, Rachel had Lily asleep on the couch under a blanket with a book open across her chest, a new one. Something Rachel had apparently recommended, and Lily had immediately started and then fallen asleep in the middle of the... Rachel tiptoed out after a few minutes, and they were left with the sleeping child and the quiet house, and the hour that sat between two people who had come home together after something real. Ethan carefully lifted Lily. She stirred, not quite waking. Dad, she murmured. Yeah. Go back to sleep. Was it good? It was fine. Go to sleep. She settled into him and was gone again immediately. He carried her upstairs. When he came back down, Victoria was standing in the kitchen with the lights low. And she'd taken off the heels, and her hair was loose. And she was looking at something on the counter, not reading it. Just looking down, like she was somewhere else. He came and stood near her. What? He said. She picked up what she'd been looking at. He expected it to be a work document, a brief, a board communication. It was a drawing, Lily's. A horse with 2 long legs and a mane that moved like water. And in the corner, in Lily's handwriting, for Victoria because you got the ears right. She had framed it, somehow in the past week, without mentioning it. Lily had put it in a small frame from the craft bin in her room and left it on the kitchen counter. Victoria stood there holding the framed drawing of a horse from an 8-year-old. And for the second time in the weeks, Ethan had known her. He watched something come apart in her face, but differently this time. Not the crack of someone under pressure. Something more like a door opening. She's going to break my heart, Victoria said quietly. Not as a complaint, almost as a wonder. Yeah, Ethan said. That's what she does. Victoria set the drawing back on the counter. She looked at it for a moment longer. 9 days, she said. 9 days, he confirmed. She looked at him. He looked at her. And something that had been building in the weeks and conversations and 2 a.m. kitchens and framed horse drawings stood right there between them. Not quite named, not yet spoken, but real enough to touch. Neither of them touched it. Not yet, but it was there. And both of them knew it, and knowing was enough for tonight. And tomorrow the board meeting would be 9 days closer, and Hale would be making his next move, and the company would need defending, and all of it would still be true and still be waiting. But tonight, in the kitchen, with the low lights and the sleeping child upstairs, and the framed drawing on the counter, there was just this, 2 people standing close together. Neither of them pretending anymore. Neither of them pretending at all. The 9 days moved fast and slow at the same time. The way time does when something large is coming at you, and you can't stop it. Only prepare for it. Victoria slept better. Not perfectly. Not through the night without interruption, but better. Ethan knew, because he stopped hearing her in the kitchen at 2 a.m. And when he mentioned it once, quietly, she said she hadn't noticed the change herself. Which he believed, because some things shift in us before we're aware they've shifted. Lily made her feelings about the board meeting known, without knowing what a board meeting was. She sensed that something important was happening, and that Victoria was carrying it. And so she began leaving things. Small things in places Victoria would find them. A rock she'd painted gold on the bathroom counter. A handwritten note folded into a small square on the coffee machine that said, "You are stronger than the thing you're worried about." Love, Lily. A pressed flower tucked into the cover of the case file Victoria had left on the dining room table. Victoria collected each one. She did not put them in a drawer. She kept them on her desk, in the corner where her coffee mug went, in a small, visible cluster that any observer would have to be paying close attention to notice. Ethan noticed. He didn't say anything about it. Patricia Nguyen called Victoria on the Monday before the meeting. The call lasted 22 minutes. Ethan was in the kitchen when Victoria came out of her office afterward, and he read the answer in her face before she said a word. "She's with me," Victoria said. 8 votes. A majority. Enough to kill the motion. Ethan exhaled. "That's it then. Hale can still make it ugly," she said. "He will. He doesn't lose quietly. Let him make it ugly," Ethan said. "Ugly doesn't change the count." She looked at him with the expression he had come to think of as the real one, not the CEO composure, not the managed distance, just her face, with everything in it. "I want you at the meeting," she said. He looked at her. Board meetings aren't typically open to spouses. They are when the spouse has been the subject of 2 months of public speculation, and the board needs to look at him and make a decision about what they see. She paused. "I'm not asking you to say anything. I'm asking you to be there." "Okay," he said. "Just like that? Just like that." She nodded once. She went back to her office, and through the door. 30 seconds later, he heard the sound of her on a call. Her voice precise and controlled and doing the work. The work she was good at. The work she had built from nothing. The work that was worth fighting for. He went back to the kitchen. He made lunch for Lily, who was home from school with a cold that had turned out to be minor, but had given him a morning of bad fear before the pediatrician confirmed it. He made soup from scratch because Lily didn't like the canned version, and because making something from ingredients was one of the things Ethan did when he needed to feel useful. He was on his second onion when Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas with the stuffed elephant and a thermometer. 99.1, she reported. "Almost normal." Almost is not the same as normal, no. But it's a lot better than yesterday. She came and sat at the island and watched him cook with the focused attention she brought to things she was interested in. "Is Victoria going to win?" she said. He looked at her. "Who told you about that?" "No one, but she's been working more than usual. And you've been making that face." "What face?" "The one you make when you're waiting for something. Like when we were waiting for Chester's test results. Your jaw does the thing." Ethan touched his jaw involuntarily. "My jaw doesn't do a thing." "It does a thing, Dad." He stirred the soup. "She's going to win," he said. "She has the votes. But there's a man who doesn't want her to. And he's going to try some things." Lily processed this. What kind of man tries to take away what someone built? The kind who can't build it himself. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's really sad, actually." Ethan looked at her. "Being so worried about someone else's thing, that you can't do your own thing," Lily said. "That's a sad way to live." Ethan thought about Richard Hale, who had been in powerful rooms his entire life and had spent the last 2 years not building but dismantling. He thought about all the energy in that, all the resource, all the careful strategy aimed entirely at something that wasn't his. "Yeah," he said, "it is." "Tell Victoria," Lily said. "Tell her what?" "That it's sad. Sometimes when you feel like someone's against you, it helps to see them as sad instead of scary." Ethan stared at his daughter. "Where did you get that?" he said. Lily shrugged. "Rachel told me. About a kid at her school." He made a mental note to raise Rachel's rate. The morning of the board meeting was a Thursday. Ethan woke at 5:30 without an alarm, which was his body's way of acknowledging what day it was. He lay still for a few minutes, listening to the house. And then he got up and went to the kitchen and started coffee. And by 5:55 Victoria was there too, which told him she hadn't really slept at all. She was in her work clothes already. Hair done, composure on. The full armor assembled before 6 in the morning. Because that was how she operated under pressure, the more was at stake. The earlier the preparation began. He handed her coffee. She took it. "How long have you been up?" he said. "A while. Did you sleep at all?" "Some, Victoria." "I'm fine. I know you're fine," he said. "I'm asking anyway." She looked at him over the mug. The armor was on, but it wasn't sealed. Not quite. Not with him. Not anymore. 3 hours, she said, maybe a little more. Okay. He sat down across from her. "What do you need right now?" "Not for the meeting. Right now. In this kitchen. What do you need?" She looked at him, like the question was in a language she was still learning to speak. "I don't know," she said. And it was honest. Completely honest. The kind of honesty that only happens when someone is too tired to manage their own presentation. "Then just sit here," he said, "until Lily gets up." Just sit here, she sat. She drank her coffee. The kitchen was quiet and the house was still, and outside it was still dark. That particular gray dark of early morning, before the world has committed to the day. After a few minutes, she said, "I've been thinking about what you said. About people being afraid of what's true." "Yeah? I've been afraid of a lot of true things," she said. For a long time he waited. "I told myself I was careful," she said. Strategic. That keeping people at distance was professional. That not needing things from anyone was strength. She paused. It was fear. Most of it was fear. Fear of what? She looked at her hands around the mug. "Of being seen," she said. "Not the CEO. Not the company, not the achievement. Just me. The actual version." And found she stopped. "Found what?" he said quietly. "Found wanting," she said. The word sat in the kitchen between them. "In 41 years," she said, "I never let anyone get close enough to decide whether I was worth it. Because if you don't let anyone decide, they can't decide against you." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "That is," he said, "the loneliest thing I've ever heard." She looked up at him. "And for the record," he said, "you're not wanting. Not even a little. Anyone who got close enough to see clearly would know that." She said nothing. She looked at him with the expression he had no category for, the one that lived past the assessment and past the composure and past every defense she had, and she was just a person. Sitting in a kitchen at 6 in the morning, hearing something she had needed to hear for a very long time and not quite knowing how to hold it. Lily appeared in the doorway in her pajamas and the lopsided braid from the night before. "Is today the day?" she said, reading the room with immediate accuracy. "Today's the day," Ethan said. Lily looked at Victoria. "Chester slept on your side last night," she said. "Did you know that?" Victoria blinked. "I didn't notice." "He knows," Lily said. "With absolute certainty. He was keeping your spot warm." Victoria looked down at the table. Her jaw moved slightly, just once. "Tell him thank you," she said. "He knows that too," Lily said. And she came and sat beside Victoria and reached over and took one of Victoria's hands in both of hers, with the matter-of-fact tenderness of someone who has decided that this is what you do for people you've claimed. And she held it without saying another word. Ethan watched his daughter hold the hand of the woman who had walked into their lives on a calculated decision and stayed for completely different reasons. And he thought, whatever this started as, it is not that anymore. And it hasn't been for a long time, and I think we all know it. He didn't say any of that out loud. He just made Lily's breakfast while she held Victoria's hand at the kitchen table. And the morning went on. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the Bennett Global Headquarters. The boardroom was on the 14th floor, the same floor where Ethan had sat across from Victoria 9 weeks ago and been handed an envelope that changed everything. He noticed that. He noticed a lot of things. They arrived together. Dana met them at the elevator with a quiet efficiency that communicated that everything was in order, and also that she had been in this woman's corner for 6 years and intended to stay there. She looked at Ethan when they stepped off the elevator with an expression that said, I'm glad you're here. He nodded once. Victoria stopped outside the boardroom door. She had been in motion all morning, all week, all 9 days. And now she stopped for just a moment, and Ethan stopped with her. The voices inside were audible, but not distinct. 11 people on the other side of a door, some of whom she had trusted, and some of whom had worked against her, and some of whom were still deciding what they were. Ready? Ethan said. She looked at him. Something in her eyes was very clear and very calm. And he understood that she had made some kind of peace on the way here. In the car, in herself with something. Ethan, she said. Yeah. Whatever happens in there, I need you to know that this, she paused. Searching for the exact right words, not the strategic ones. Not the managed ones, just the true ones. This is not what I expected. When I handed you that invitation, you are not what I expected. Is that good or bad? He said. It's the best thing, she said. It's the best thing that's happened to me in longer than I can tell you. He looked at her. Right at her, the way he'd learned to look at her. Past the surface, and into the actual person. Then let's go make sure you keep your company, he said. Because you built it and you should have it. She nodded once. She opened the door. The room went quiet when they walked in. Not the polite quiet of a meeting starting, but the specific quiet of a room, recalibrating 11 people, looking at 2 people, and forming their conclusions in real time. Hale was already seated, third from the left neft, and he looked up when they entered with the expression of a man who had arranged this room to his advantage, and was now performing the confidence of someone who believes the arrangement holds. Victoria walked to the head of the table. She did not look at Hale. She looked at her board, at each face, at the people she had recruited and convinced and built alongside, and, in some cases, trusted wrong. Ethan took a seat at the wall. Not at the table. He was not a board member. He was not there to speak. He was there the way Victoria had asked him to be, simply, clearly, visibly present. A husband who was in the room. Victoria remained standing. I know why we're here, she said. Her voice was even and full and carried the authority of someone who had stopped apologizing for what she was. I know what's been alleged. I know what some of you have been told and what some of yous have been persuaded to believe. She paused. I'm not going to spend this meeting defending my marriage. I'm not going to defend my character, my decisions, or my right to be standing at the head of this table. You've had 12 years of evidence. You don't need more. She opened the folder in front of her. What I am going to do is show you where this company is going, and what it will cost all of us if it doesn't get there. For 31 minutes, Victoria Bennett presented the future of Bennett Global Logistics with the precision and passion of someone who had built every piece of it by hand. The Southeastern Corridor, the infrastructure investments, the technology partnerships that would double capacity in 3 years. The numbers that Hale's acquisition would flatten within 18 months because Hale's model was extraction, not growth, and the board knew it, even if they hadn't said it. Ethan watched the room. He watched the faces. He watched Patricia Nguyen, who was taking notes, and whose expression was the careful neutral of someone who has already made her decision and is listening to confirm it. He watched the 4 Hale votes, who were watched the numbers, with the expressions of people perhaps doing math they hadn't done before. And he watched Richard Hale. Hale was not taking notes. Hale was waiting. Victoria finished. She closed the folder. I'll open it to questions, she said. Hale spoke before anyone else could. The board appreciates the presentation, Victoria. Smooth, warm, absolutely controlled. However, the issue before us today isn't the company's projections. It's the question of whether the current leadership can be trusted to make decisions that are genuinely in the company's interest rather than, and here he paused, perfectly calibrated, personal and contractual ones. The room was absolutely still. Hale turned to look at Ethan at the wall, not aggressively, pleasantly, as though he were including him in a professional discussion. Mr. Parker, he said, since you're here, perhaps you could speak to the nature of your relationship with Ms. Bennett, in the interest of the transparency she's been advocating. Every face in the room turned to Ethan. This was the move. This was what Hale had been building to since the investor gala, since the wedding, since the website. Get the mechanic in the room and put him on the spot in front of the people whose votes decided everything. Ethan met Hale's eyes from across the room. He did not move from his seat. He did not shift or straighten or perform composure. He was simply still, the way he was still in his own shop when a difficult problem presented itself, settled in himself. In no hurry, thinking clearly. "You want me to explain my relationship with my wife," Ethan said. "Not a question, just a restatement." "In the interest of transparency," Hale said pleasantly. "Okay," Ethan said. "I'll tell you what I know." The room stayed perfectly quiet. "I know that she wakes up at 2 in the morning, because her brain won't stop. And I know that she started sleeping better about 3 weeks in, because the house had other people in it, and she didn't feel like she was carrying everything alone anymore." He paused. "I know that when my daughter knocked over a vase in the hallway, her first instinct was to check if Lily was hurt, not to worry about the vase, which told me more about her character than any board communication I could have read." He paused again. "I know that she kept a framed drawing of a horse on her desk because an 8-year-old made it for her, and that she keeps 3 small rocks and 2 folded notes in the corner of her workspace because a child left them there for her, and she didn't want to put them away." The room was so still he could hear the ventilation system. "I know what a real person looks like," Ethan said. "I've been watching people my whole life in shops, in parking lots, in break rooms, in the ways they treat people who can't do anything for them. I know what's real." He looked at Hale steadily. "She's real. What we have is real, and whether you believe that or not, doesn't actually change it." He stopped. He did not say anything else. He looked at the table in front of him, and then he looked at Victoria. She was looking back at him. She was not doing the CEO look. She was not doing the assessment look. She was looking at him. The way have said the thing you look at someone when they have said that you didn't know you needed said in the room. You needed it said, and your whole body recognizes it before your mind catches up. Hale said, "That's very touching. But it's not evidence. Neither is a website," Ethan said evenly. "But you built your entire case on one." A sound moved through the room. Not laughter. Something subtler. The sound of people recognizing a truth. Patricia Nguyen put her pen down. "I'd like to call the vote," she said. Hale looked at her. For the first time, something moved behind his composed exterior, a rapid calculation. A recalibration, the faint tell of a man who has realized the room has shifted in a direction he didn't account for. "We haven't finished discussion," he said. "I think we have," Patricia said. She looked around the table. 3 other board members nodded. "Call the vote," one of them said. The motion to remove Victoria Bennett as CEO of Bennett Global Logistics was called to a vote at 3:14 p.m. on a Thursday. The result was 8-3 against removal. Victoria kept her company. Hale stood when the count was announced. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Victoria across the length of the table with an expression that was professionally neutral and personally furious. And he said, "Congratulations, Victoria. I hope the decisions ahead prove as interesting as the ones behind you." "I'm sure they will," she said. Completely level. Not triumphant, not gloating, just certain. He left the room first. His 3 votes followed, and then the rest of the board began to disperse. And Patricia Nguyen came around the table and put her hand briefly on Victoria's arm and said, "He won't stop. You know that I know," Victoria said. "He's not the first and he won't be the last. But today he didn't win. And that matters." Patricia nodded. She left. Dana appeared in the doorway with an expression of barely suppressed relief and said, "Your 4 o'clock wants to know if it's still on." "Push it an hour," Victoria said. "I need a moment." Dana nodded and disappeared. The room emptied. And then it was just the 2 of them, Victoria at the head of the table and Ethan at the wall. The room full of the specific quality of silence that comes after something large has resolved. Victoria exhaled. It was not a dramatic sound. It was the sound of someone who had been holding their breath for 2 months and had finally, At 3:17 on a Thursday afternoon. Let it out. Ethan crossed the room. He didn't say anything, not immediately. Because some moments don't need immediate language. He stood close to her, and she looked at him, and she said, quietly, and without any performance attached to it, "You didn't have to say that. I said what was true," he said. "You know I do that. You said it in front of 11 people, including the man who's been trying to dismantle my life for 2 years. Seemed like a good audience," he said. She made a sound that was half a breath and half a laugh and completely unguarded. "What you said about the rock," she said, "and the notes. Yeah. How long have you known I kept those?" "Since about week 3, he said. I noticed. I didn't say anything because I figured it was yours to keep. She looked at him. "Most people would have said something. Most people would have used it for something," he said. "I just noticed." She stopped. "That's what," he said. "That's one of the most decent things anyone has ever done for me," she said. "Just noticing something about me and keeping it for me without an angle." He looked at her. She looked at him. And the thing that had been standing between them in kitchens and cars, and late evenings and festival grounds and investor galas, the thing that had no name yet but had been accumulating weight for weeks, arrived in the boardroom at 3:19 p.m. and refused to be managed any further. "Victoria," he said. "I know," she said. "We should probably talk about I know," she said again. "The agreement ends in 4 months." She nodded. "And I need you to know," he paused, finding the words that were true and not just functional. "I need you to know that whatever you decide about those 4 months, about what comes after, about what this is or isn't, I'm not going anywhere. Not because of the contract. Not because of anything, except that I don't want to go anywhere. I want to be clear about that so you know you have a choice." She was very still. "You're giving me an out," she said. "I'm giving you a choice," he said. "Those are different things." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "What if I don't want the out?" He held her gaze. "Then you should probably say that." "I'm saying it now," she said. "I don't want the out. I don't want the 4 months to end. I don't want—" She stopped, and this time the stop was not managed. It was real. The pause of someone crossing a threshold they have been standing at for a long time. "I don't want to go back to the way things were, before the house and the dinners and the 2 a.m. kitchens, and Chester's head in my lap and Lily's notes." She paused. "I don't want to go back to before you." The boardroom was quiet. Ethan moved one step closer. "Okay," he said. "Okay? That's what I wanted to hear. That's all you're going to say?" "For now," he said. "We can say the rest at home." She looked at him for a second, and then she did something that no one in any professional context had ever seen Victoria Bennett do. She stepped forward and put her head against his shoulder and stood there. In the boardroom, where she had just won the fight of her professional life. And held on. He held on too. They stood there for a minute. Maybe 2. The fluorescent lights hummed. The city moved outside the window, going about its business unaware. Then she straightened. She took a breath. She was herself again, but a different version of herself. The one that had been coming through for months. The one that wasn't afraid of being seen. "I have a 4 o'clock, she said. "Push to 5, he reminded her. "Right." She picked up her folder. "We need to talk to Lily." "She already knows," he said. "She's 8. She's Lily," he said. "She's known since the festival." Victoria thought about it. She thought about the horse drawing in the frame, the gold rock on the bathroom counter, Chester sleeping on her side of the bed. "Yeah," she said softly. "She probably has." They walked out of the boardroom together, past the desk where Dana was already fielding calls and smiling at something on her screen, past the elevator and the 14th floor and the place where an envelope had landed on a workbench and set everything in motion. That evening, they sat at the kitchen table the way they did every evening. Now Lily with her homework spread across the whole surface the way she always did, occupying more space than any one person needed. Chester monitoring for snacks. The ordinary comfortable noise of a household going about its life. Lily looked up when they sat down and read their faces the way she always did. the immediate, thorough reading of a child who had learned to pay attention. "She won," Ethan said. "We," Victoria said. Lily looked at her. Then she looked at Ethan. Then she looked at both of them together, the way she'd been looking at them for weeks. With that quiet certainty, that 8-year-old's clear-eyed knowing. "Okay," she said, in the tone she used when things had landed the way she'd been expecting them to. "Good." And she went back to her homework. Chester put his head on Victoria's knee. Ethan looked at the kitchen, at his daughter doing multiplication at the table, at the framed horse drawing on the counter, at the woman beside him who had walked into his life with an invitation and a contract and a plan, and who had ended up with something neither of them had planned for. He reached over and put his hand over hers on the table. She turned her hand and held it. She did not let go. Later, months later, at another company event, when a journalist asked Victoria Bennett what had changed her, what had shifted in her leadership approach and her public presence and the warmth that people now said she carried into a room differently than used to, she said something that made it into several profiles and one commencement speech and a framed quote that Lily put on her wall the day she turned 9. She said, "I stopped being afraid of being chosen. I let one person see me clearly, and he chose me anyway. Everything after that was just building something real." The journalist asked who the person was. She smiled. "My husband," she said. "He was always going to be my husband. I just didn't know it when I handed him the invitation." And Ethan Parker, fleet mechanic, single father, the man who had gone from a grease-covered workbench to a boardroom. In 9 weeks, the man who had listened before he judged and stayed when it was hard and said the true thing instead of the easy one when she gave that answer. Making dinner with Chester underfoot, and Lily explaining something about magnets to him. And he didn't hear it until that night, when Dana texted him the quote. He read it twice. He set his phone face down on the counter. He went back to dinner. And he was smiling, and he didn't need the room to see it. Because some things are just yours, the real ones. The ones that started as a contract and became a life. The ones that nobody outside of a kitchen on a quiet evening could fully understand, and that's exactly what makes them worth everything. Some things you don't perform, some things you just live. And this Lily's voice in the next room, Chester's warmth against his leg, the sound of a woman's heels on the stairs of a house that had somehow, without anyone planning it, become home. This was the most real thing Ethan Parker had ever been part of. He had chosen it. She had chosen it, and neither of them was ever going to let it go.